is instrumental in pushing forward Microsoft's exciting work in this area. He's going to give us a glimpse of the ways that Microsoft is reinventing software that many of us use every day. I mean, it's reshaping the way we work and think. I mean, who doesn't use Microsoft products? Except people who use Apple. But first I want to show a very short video. It's a marketing video, but I think it gives a really good idea of what we're going to talk about. So, we play the video? So, Jared, welcome to MTech Digital.
Thank you, Will.
Now, I want to start by just asking, how on earth did we get here? Because, I mean, it was only a few months ago that, we were told this stuff existed, or most people found out that this stuff existed and was so good, and, here it is in Excel.
In many ways, it's been a much longer way than people are seeing in the public. So if I just kind of take a step back for a moment, we've been working in the future what productivity will look like for some time. And we have been preparing the set of apps that we just saw in that video to start to have the controls, start to have, in fact, a scripting language that we could use to automate work with it. And so when the LLMs came along, what's so amazing to us is that we could quickly teach them about the apps. We could also, and I hope we talk a little bit about this, do something that we call grounding them in the data of a customer. And when we put those three things together, LLM, the apps that would be controlled with this scripting language, and then the customer's data, frankly, what we realized is about magic. That started to happen a couple of months ago, and we have been on board for these things. And in fact, at Microsoft, we are now just on, AI, the cycle time changed so much for us. So that is what we produce what you see.
And, I mean, Microsoft products are used by billions of people. Can you give us just a sense of, what it's going to mean to, maybe talk us through some of the things we saw in the video. I mean, it all looks, really flashy and cool, but how does that actually change how people are going to, do boring stuff like write emails and spreadsheets and presentations?
We are just learning about this right now. I've been using what you saw in the video, we call it Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot. We use that name on purpose because we're trying to communicate with the name that this is not something that does your work for you. But what I would say from my usage and from what we're hearing from customers that are using it right now is that it really does change the patterns of work. You have to have this to learn. You have to think about your work. So if I get from the angle of what is the technology doing incredibly well in the context of a video conference, so a Teams meeting, a meeting, that type of thing, it is blow your mind. Its ability to essentially understand, we talked about some to understand what's going on in the context of the discussion, help guide the discussion, surface issues, summarize what's happening, help you actually query a meeting as if it were a document, or a database post meeting. that totally changes human interactions on funding. It's also really good at some of the more kind of mundane parts. So long email thread summarizes those very handily. You can propose responses back to people. It makes processing your email something different. You are working with the machine to process that input, hopefully changes the experience for you. But there are also two things to learn. So for instance, as I used it to process email, it doesn't read exactly the way I would. It's not yet picked up on my style. I can tweak things like the casualness and formalness of the reply, but it's not immediately clear. And that's some of the stuff that we're still learning as it gets into the working routine with people. But what I would say, with just taking a step back for a moment, across the things that people do every day, meet with others, process messaging, create content, manage their calendars, any of those core tasks that we need are going to get work done. This Copilot really fundamentally changes how you have to think about those tasks.
Now, back on the idea of like how we got here, when we were talking to you about this event, and you were saying, how actually the pandemic weirdly, set a lot of things in motion for, how generative AI has been able to land maybe quicker than it would have otherwise. What did you mean by that? Can you give us some examples?
Well, I've been working at Microsoft on what we call our productivity business for 17 years now. So that is what people think of as Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Outlook, Teams, the basics of how people get work done generally. And pre-pandemic, I was going around the world trying to convince people to turn video on when they had meetings, to stop dialing in, on a PSTN. And the pandemic obviously changed everything. I like to say that in many ways, it made it so that almost all human interactions in business were all of a sudden digitally mediated. And with that information, that set of data that we had, it really created the foundation for us to then introduce LLMs as you're doing with Copilot, and to have them reason across this really vast treasure trove of, and that changes everything. So it's, as I talked to my team, you couldn't script this better if you were writing Loop. You have this incredible event that the world goes through to accelerate digital transformation by decades. And then on top, you introduce something that can take that digital treasure trove and do something incredibly useful with it. And the stepwise order in which that progressed, just to me, it's marvelous. It also raised a lot of questions for it, but that's why we're here, because we've had 3 years, frankly, that it needs to be here.
And we see that once we see examples of this technology, and we see the really cool examples of how it can be used to generate stuff, but drawing on people's data to do that. And of course, many business users will have questions about how that's been used and how that's been protected. Can you tell us a bit about how these tools work, and why businesses shouldn't worry about that, or should they?
Yeah, you bet. When you look at the video, one of the things you might think is like, oh, it looks like they took GPT-4 and plugged it into Word, and there you go. That's kind of half the story. Essentially, what we've done is we've created, you can kind of think of it as an orchestration engine that sits and works with pretty powerful services. So yes, to LLMs, absolutely. 3GPT-4, some of our own models that we develop. But we don't just plug that directly into the app so that people can interact with them. Instead, this Copilot essentially mediates between an end user sitting in an app, that LLM, and then the user's data. Everything is happening in the context of what we call a tenancy to our customer. So that tenancy essentially is how someone gets into the cloud as a business, and moving their email into the cloud, moving their content into the cloud, and what we call tenant boundary. And that tenant boundary has been well established for the last 10 years as people have been moving to the cloud. Again, thinking about how we got the move to the cloud has been really critical for us, because it has essentially meant that people have already done the work to understand, their security boundary, how they think about compliance with that tenancy, and how they think about privacy in that tenancy. So as the Copilot uses the LLM, it works with your data, it does so within that tenant boundary, and it acts like you. So it simply has the permissions that you have. It respects all of the privacy boundaries, all of the things that you put up in terms of compliance with industry regulations. Nothing changes. And again, think about how quickly we can turn this around into a few months. It's because we built on top of at the infrastructure that has been established over a decade. So when we actually architecturally break this apart for our customers, they're pretty surprised because they're like, wow, this essentially looks like ChatGPT, but done within my tenant, like my security context, and then able to ground itself on my data. And therein it's kind of eureka. You're like, wow, this is valuable. Just even if nothing else for in a boundary, the companies over your city.
So I'm really interested in how people are using this tech. I mean, I'm repeating myself, but it was in the labs last year, now it's in the world. And just like 2 quick examples of that. I got stuck in the elevator this morning with my hotel, but the woman I was stuck in there with, we started chatting and she said, oh, you're going to this event, you must be talking about ChatGPT. And it's just weird to hear people talk about ChatGPT anyway, I still find that strange. But she used it in her work to write reports. She previously hated it. She'd written a report and her manager had said to her, you did such great work on that report, you put so much effort in. I said, oh, did you own up? And she said, no, of course not, why would I? It's so competitive. Everybody is trying to upskill, and here I've got an easy, free way to upskill. And then the other example which stuck with me, like in immigration coming to the US, because I flew in from London, there was a college kid, and again, we were chatting about ChatGPT, although actually he called it ChatCBD, but he's at an experimental stage of his life. But he'd been using it at school, and he wanted to get into video making, and he was curious about what does it even mean to be a sort of video maker when generative AI is there. So sorry, that was rather long-winded, but you guys must be seeing more use cases than most, or thinking ahead about use cases than most. And when you think of the polish and user experience that we have on Word or Excel or these products, how are you rolling out this stuff so fast, but also making sure that the user experience is slick and anticipating what people will actually want from it?
There's so much there, Will, so much there. Let me just back up a little bit and talk about what we were envisioning just based on what we're seeing. First off, as I use the tool, one of the things that has become very clear to me is I never want to work without it. Like literally, it becomes this thing where you're like, man, I have a superpower. I don't know a place that wouldn't provide this for me, wouldn't have it for me. And so it does start to feel like you have a little bit of an advantage. Now, if we carry that forward, and what we're seeing broadly is the patterns as people start to use it, is this will just be a new way to work. You'll never start, a report on your own thinking, I wonder how the first paragraph should start, what should the outline be? Instead, you have an interactive process of saying, I'm going to write a report about this broad topic, here are my objectives, how could I structure it? And what I find is that the LLMs, they make stuff up, they're not always right, but they like creating collaborative environment with someone else. And you're bouncing ideas off. You can say, I don't like that outline, but I like this piece. Let's dive into that piece. And so you start to get into a collaborative process that really is different than anything you do when you're working on your own and not with another human. That pattern, and that's why we call it provider. That pattern should be a fundamental part of the way people work, whether they're drafting an email, writing a report, analyzing numbers, whatever they have to do. We think that pattern back and forth with the machine is going to be a new skill set we're going to have to do. Now, thinking about what people are going to be able to do, we see a couple of different, areas, avenues. The LLM is particularly good at summarizing information. So as you feed it grounded data, it can summarize tremendous amounts of information and give you an outline that's incredibly helpful to doing your day jobs or keeping up. It's very good at being creative. So you can give it inputs and say, let's work in this direction, but I need to think creatively. It can be very, very productive in this way. It's very good about essentially communication and helping you analyze your communication. How did this meeting go? Who said what? What are the things that are still open? What are the decisions that were made? We see many customers who are using it, they just stopped taking notes in meetings. I stopped taking notes in meetings because the notes that this thing provides are much better than any human would do. It works directly out of the transcript. So those use cases we think are really important. If I project it even further, I have 4 kids, they range from 25 to 17. My kids are never going to learn to pivot table. They're gonna say to Excel, hey, you can pivot table. Because the way you interact with applications will change. And if you think about that, we think this idea of a ChatGPT-like interface, but that knows your business better than you know your business, And that changes, we think, just the way jobs are constructed and how you can get this done in a business context. So there's a lot out there, a lot of use cases we're just discovering as we push this out with customers.
Does Microsoft feel some kind of responsibility to its customers in supporting that transition? I mean, word processors have got shinier, but they haven't really changed in decades. And now, just like that, we're doing something wholly new. And yet, you're the providers of this technology. Is there a support role you need to play as well?
We think so. I mean, with our early adopters, what they come back to us and say, first they go like, wow, it really works so much. I mean, the video is so much of what we've done over the decades is like amazing marketing videos and things, and you think, it was a little bit more like a toy than it should be. So the thing that they're asking us essentially is, how do we think about change management? How do we think about, we'll have a group of early adopters, people who are on the cutting edge and who are really excited about it. But what about common accounting who just wants a tool? How do you get them to think about the changes? And we haven't worked out, what we do see is people who feel like they have an advantage, and people who start to see that advantage in others wonder what's going on. And so there is a bit of virality that they're already seeing from customers who.
Again, in the room, if you've got a question, just put your hand up and let yourselves be known. But while the mics are going around, there's a really great question I love.